afternoon, good evening all, it's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I'm creating not only to just bring awareness and to create understanding, but I really want to get into some of the mechanisms and the mechanics around complex trauma so that we can develop ways to actually heal. Now, this is the next video in the adoption series. I want to keep going with the recent videos into breaking down into a little bit more detail of what's going on. And this is something that, regardless of whether it's an at-birth removal or a later placement, this is an all-encompassing component of adoption, is from those that know us and around us in our friendships and relationship, and from a therapeutic perspective, you need to be aware of, you will find within adoptees, and this is a purely individual thing, but we will latch on to certain things that are far more important to us than most people will realize. Yes, this is a broader component of trauma, but what I've found almost unique around this particular aspect of trauma is when you're looking at it from adoption or from a removal and placement perspective. Because you have an infant to a young child over time making understandings to try to cope, interpret, and survive, to process everything that is going on. There are certain key things, key questions, key recognition points or mannerisms or whatever it is that we will latch onto that have so much more meaning than most will even grasp, to the point where we can have a completely visceral response when triggered. An easy example of this is the word mom. A word, Mother's Day, we're exposed to it all over the place. But every adoptee, when we're honest with ourselves, we have a very strong interpretation of that word. Where the Western world particularly, but in a lot of modern people that don't have this background, it's a word that's dismissed or has a very basic response. But, like for me, like I know when people say my adopted parents are my mom and dad, they're fucking not. And I'm sorry to put it that bluntly, but they're fucking not. They're my parents. They do not deserve that title of what mom and dad means to me. Sorry to put it this bluntly, but I'm not going to mince words with this one. And my response when that's said to me has ended relationships and friendships. I've walked away because I won't be demeaned because of how much that word mom and dad mean to me, and what I feel and know is involved in what a mother and a father actually are. There are fundamental layers of difference of how it expressed. There's mom and dad, or there's mother and father. When I've worked from a therapeutic perspective with people that have childhood trauma from their biological parents, the easy separation is you don't call them mom and dad, you call them, they're your mother and your father, because biologically they are. Mom and dad is a role that is close and intimate and personal and holds a hell of a lot of importance. And your value and worth is around who you give that importance to. And it's got to be given because you genuinely feel it, not giving it because you need to survive. And that's what a lot of adoptees are forced to do. We have to give that because it's expected to survive. If we don't, it completely screws up our relationship in our adoptive household. And we try to not do that because we want to have as functional a family as possible. But in my core being, and I know a lot of other adoptees I've talked to who have the same thing, the simple word mom and the simple word dad carries a far more intense response. We also get a lot more reactive when we see people disrespect their biological mom and dad, ones especially that don't deserve it. And this is what I mean. These are things that you guys out there need to understand when you know adoptees, when you truly listen to us, when you understand little triggers like that. You can see the story as it unfolds of what's going on internally and what we're trying to make sense of. And also judging ourselves, is our response right? Like for me personally, I'm going through a circumstance where a very dear friend of mine, a mother that if any adopted child was adopted into with a mother like this person, they would have, it's everything you would want. From a biological mother, she would be everything you would want as a mother. She does everything for her kids, and her kids treat her like crap. And it tears me apart to a very visceral response in some regards now that they're older, like old teenagers, 18, 19, and so forth. How dare they do that to something that I hold so sacred, and I know a lot of other adoptees that do. Again, this visceral response needs to be understood. It's a PTSD trigger. This is not something that we've chosen. So our reaction to the word mom is a PTSD trigger. No different to a combat veteran's trigger to a helicopter or a gunfire. It's the same mechanisms of response, layered thousands and thousands of times. And it needs to be understood and valued. Because I've watched therapists do some horrific dismissing because of that complacency, of not understanding of what's wrapped up in those words and what we know their meaning are for us. Triggers for adoptees are everywhere. Every movie, every TV commercial, every billboard, every shopping center, everywhere that people go, the triggers are there constantly. Everywhere you go where you see families and kids and parents and teens and everything, every facet of society triggers adoptees in some form, in some way. Because of what we hold sacred to ourselves are those words of mom and dad and family, and how we've created this structure of what that means to us. And when that's dismissed by people around us, it affects our relationships with those people. As I've said before, I've had others where I've ended friendships over it. It killed both of my long-term relationships because I was judged for my responses to something that was very personal to me. And if that wasn't being valued, then why am I here? I tried and spent years trying to fix it, but there was no way I could get past that moment and those points. And that's the thing that adoption creates. Yes, we're trying to meld two personalities, two people, but we're also trying to make sense of an impossible amount of crap that we didn't create to function and to fit into what society says is normal, what society expects all those that participate in to have. And in the construction of that growing up as children, we add a hell of a lot of investment of emotion and understanding into particular words and terms associated with those words. Like mom is a word, but it has a whole ecology of understanding around it. Same with dad and so forth and so forth. For me, my adopted parents are my adopted parents. They will never be mom and dad, no matter what. I will never emotionally invest in that, because no matter how often I tried to reach out, it was never met equally. I know a lot of adoptees in the same boat, but I also know a lot of adoptees that their adoptive parents are their mom and dad, and their biological family are a waste of space. They will not have anything to do with them. This is an individual thing. So when you're working and understanding or being around adoptees, you need to learn the person, the adoptee that you are with or around. You need to understand their interpretations of things. There is no generalized rule to this. Because as I said, you have infants and children growing up trying to make sense of the impossible. So each person, each adoptee's interpretation is their own and needs to be valued and treated and learned as their own, so that we can be understood, to work with, to connect and heal, and so forth and so forth. So by giving us the grace is by learning what we are and how we interpret. And trust me, you tiptoe around this stuff, we know. We know people, and I get it a lot, and I'm grateful that they're trying, but it's still just as triggering. I would love to be able to find and create ways, again, part of why I'm doing this channel, is in society where this can be discussed more openly, so that we can create ways of working with this, to where these sorts of conversations are understood more, so that we can, on a broader sense, teach people how to make it easier in bridging these understandings, so that adoptees in our relationships can learn to be part of and heal, and we don't make the messes that we do, that are interpreted the way they are, that end those relationships. I just got a whole nest of things coming in, but I'm not, that it's too long in this video to do. But because of what we didn't learn and because of our experiences, we miss parts and we don't step into parts in our relationships, and that has a price tag. And yes, it's our fault for not doing it, but we didn't know how to. And I will do other videos on this. But this is what I mean by giving us the grace. We don't do it deliberately. My responses to mom and dad, I don't do it deliberately. I'm not choosing to get more aggressive with it. It's what I feel. It's what my experiences have created. And it's how I value what is sacred to me. So thank you guys for the time. I love your feedback and comments and your patience. I'm getting over a flu, so talking and coughing is a little bit of a challenge with the choky thing added on top. But I love you guys' comments and feedbacks, and be kind, be gentle, be respectful, and I'll see you next time.